Agenda for tonight. Today we'll be discussing employment versus sponsorship needs, how to market your strengths to employers, legal protections for you as a worker in the US, what employers can and cannot do, as well as how to stay informed with the ever-changing visa process. Your facilitators tonight will be Ayo Ogunye. She is a UCS career counselor, and she'll be joining us for our breakout rooms. My name is Chelsea Thomas. I am a graduate intern with UCS, and I will be also conducting some of the breakout rooms and facilitating today. And I'm also joined by Cassandra Robertson, and she is my fellow graduate intern. So for those of you who are not familiar with University Career Services, we offer career counseling to UH students as part of your fees at the university. So we're completely free for students. You don't have to charge for any of our appointments. If you have a quick chat that you would like to join and just ask a quick question with one of our staff members, we do offer virtual chats Monday through Friday, 10 to 12 and 2 to 4. Those hours will be good until 11:20, at which point we will pause momentarily and in the spring resume our drop-in hours. If you would like to speak with one of our counselors via virtual chat, you can go to the UH Career Services website at uh.edu/UCS and select at the very bottom right corner, there'll be that Get Help button that you see on the slide, and that will connect you with someone from our office. If you feel you need more time with a career counselor and you'd like to have more deeper instructions and talk further, you can also schedule a career counseling appointment via Cougar Pathway, similar to how you RSVP'd for this workshop as well. And of course, we have periodically different workshops and special events that we host. So I encourage you to check out our website often and see what we have going on, especially with the spring semester coming up. As I mentioned earlier, this event is in conjunction with International Education Week. And so these are the upcoming events that are left for the remainder of this week. If you are interested in going to any of them or participating in any of them, I highly, highly encourage you to check out uh.edu/IEW. You can find more information on each event and how to sign up on that website. And then lastly, I mentioned Cougar Pathway. So if you are interested in signing up for any additional workshops, scheduling career counseling appointments, or even checking out the job board that we have on Cougar Pathway, you can do that by accessing the Cougar Pathway icon via Access UH. You can also, via that platform, have your resume, CV, or cover letter reviewed for access onto that job platform. You can schedule on-campus interviews, and that's where you can also find more information on other events, career fairs, all of that good stuff that we have to offer via that app. So our goals tonight, what we are here to do today is first develop strategies in advocating for your rights in the workplace, along with identifying personal strengths and skills to market yourself to employers. And so you'll notice there's a little chat function. Please feel free to drop any kind of questions you may have in that chat box. We'll be checking it regularly throughout the presentation. Because we do have a lot of information to cover, if we don't answer it as we're going along, just know that we do see it and we will either address it as we go on, or we have a lot of time dedicated at the end for questions. So just so you know, feel free to drop it in there, but we may have to save some of those until the end. All right, so first we're going to discuss employment versus sponsorship needs. So with any type of employment, you want to really ask yourself, what are you looking for with an employment opportunity? And so for our international students, the question will be, what benefits does US employment specifically play in your life, and how does it support your career goals? So for some people, if you think about where you'll be in 5 years from now, that may be working in the US long term. That may be working abroad, exploring other opportunities. It could also be being in your home country. It depends for you what you're looking to gain. And so by thinking ahead and really asking yourself, what do I want to gain? What benefits does US employment have for me? That can help you navigate sponsorship and how to navigate the visa process. There may also be personal factors as to why you would like to work in the US. There may be skills and knowledge that you really think would be valuable to learn and develop yourself as a professional. There could also be industry opportunities available that maybe there's markets that are here in the US that you really want to be able to access and experience. And of course, anytime you're looking for employment, there's always that elements of benefits. What kind of pay will you have? What kind of benefits package might you receive? So all of these things are important to consider when you are looking for employment and deciding what opportunities are going to best fit your needs. And so for a number of people, that can also play a role in when and how they choose to disclose their sponsorship needs. So it's important to decide for yourself how and when you feel comfortable discussing the topic of sponsorship with employers. There's a number of factors that you'll want to consider. And while there's no, everybody's decision is their own personal decision on when they're comfortable, there's a couple of factors you may want to take into consideration. The first one is going to be timing. So when do you begin having those conversations with employers? For some individuals, they may choose to have that discussion during the interview process. Maybe they decide to have that later on, as we'll see in some of our case studies later. One thing I would encourage students to keep in mind, though, is you want to make sure you do have a relationship with that employer to some extent, that they have an understanding of who you are. Maybe they've seen your resume, so that when that discussion does come up, it's not just them considering the need to spend the money on sponsorship, but they're also connecting you as a worker and a valuable component into that decision as well. You'll also want to consider what delivery method are the employers going to find that need for sponsorship on. Will it be in writing? So maybe that would be in a cover letter or in an application for a job. Others may choose to have that conversation in person during the interview stage or during networking opportunities. You also want to consider your knowledge of the legal regulations and visa options that will be available to the employers if they choose to sponsor you. Some employers may have questions and they may not feel totally comfortable or know the process of sponsorship. So by being able to answer those questions and help along in that process, that can help facilitate that discussion with employers and not make it so overwhelming and confusing of a process for them, which in the end encourages the likelihood that they may be willing to sponsor. And lastly, again, going back to your personal needs with employment, you'll want to decide for yourself, do I need sponsorship? Maybe depending on if you have the 1-year OPT or 3-year OPT, you may decide I may not want to be with this company for over 3 years. And so deciding for yourself, where does this opportunity fit into your plan and what you're wanting to gain can really help navigate when you want to approach some of these factors and how you want to start that conversation with sponsorship. And then I'm going to pass over to Cash, and she's going to talk about marketing your strengths.
Okay, so with marketing your strengths, it's first important to identify your strengths. So let's see. When communicating your experiences to employers, you want to make sure that you are identifying some strengths or skills you feel like will be valuable to the role or will attract the employer. But in identifying those things, it's important to ask yourself first, what do you do well? What do people compliment you on? What are your peers or your coworkers compliment you on? Is it your ability to work in a group, or maybe you're really great at solving puzzles, or kind of thinking abstractly or analytically about solving a problem. Any recognitions you might have received from school or from work can attribute themselves to what your skill set is. And then also paying attention to what motivates you. What motivates you to do well in a role or for a specific task? Do you like, being a leader amongst your team or your peers in class? And then also what might set you apart from your peers. So if you and some other students are all applying for a certain internship, what skill set or what strengths do you possess that will differentiate you or separate you from some other skills that your peers might have? What makes you a strong candidate to employers? So these things are what we would kind of consider to be transferable skills. So qualities that you can use in different settings, that will be useful in all settings. So some skills that employers tend to look for can be like problem solving, teamwork, written or verbal communication, a strong work ethic, leadership, initiative. So these types of things are what you want to express on your resume. So you wouldn't necessarily take this list and just copy and paste it somewhere on your resume, but it's something that you would kind of illustrate throughout your bullet points under your experience or under maybe some projects you might have completed for school or outside of school, to show that you have these transferable skills. So maybe in one of your job descriptions, you worked at the ice cream shop on campus, but you're applying for a advertising internship with an advertising company. So for the ice cream shop, maybe you really had to be detail oriented to ensure that everyone's order was correct each time a customer came in. That detail oriented skill is something that an employer in any setting might also look for in a potential employee. The same goes for communication. If you had to communicate a lot working as a busboy or a server at a restaurant, that's something you're going to have to possess to work in any type of job setting. And these are the skills that employers are really looking for or looking to see throughout your resume or a cover letter, or even in a potential interview when you discuss some of the skills that you can bring to the role. These are some of the things that they're looking for. So when you're identifying your strengths, making sure you're tying those into some of those transferable skills to reflect on your resume and then also reflect in an interview.
So next we're going to go over some legal protections for workers. So in the US, there's a number of laws and legal regulations that protects your rights from discrimination. And it's really important to know this because when you're talking to employers, you're interviewing with employers, it's really good to know your rights so that if something comes up that is in violation, you know what your protections are. So in the US, all US workers that are working for a covered entity, which should be the vast majority of employers in the US, they have protection against discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, and age. And those that follow are the specific laws in case you want to know specifics about those. You also have protections regarding your right to be paid the same amount of money for the same type of work. You also have the right to reasonable accommodations for a disability. And so if you do require some kind of accommodation to help you perform your job, and it's a reasonable accommodation, US employers are required to provide those. You also have the right to continued employment should you become pregnant and if you should need maternity leave. So all of these things are protections for all US workers regardless of your work authorization status. And so, like I said, it's really important that if you see any of these being in violation or you're being asked about some of these maybe in an interview, feel comfortable to speak up and know that there's protections for you. You don't have to necessarily address any of these because they're protected. And on that note, Cash has a couple extra of the specific can and cannot do so that when you are interviewing, you have an idea of your rights.
Okay, so some things that employers can and cannot do. So we kind of talked about some of that information. So asking about any personal information that is considered protected. So that is like your religion, your national origin, your age. Those are some things that they cannot ask about. They also can't require you to work without receiving any type of pay or compensation, but they also cannot require any form of payment in order for you to be hired or for an offer to be extended. And then one final note I wanted to make sure we touch on is if you are working on campus with CPT, they cannot ask you to work more than the allotted amount of hours that your visa permits. So if you have a 20-hour cap per week, your employer cannot ask you to work 30 hours, 35 hours, or even 21 hours over your allotment of hours that you're strictly supposed to meet. But on the reverse side of that, there are a few things that employers can do. So they can ask questions about your work authorization status. They can request documentation about your schooling, your work experience, or request documentation regarding your visa. They can ask about specific information that you put on your resume and on an application. So you want to make sure that you're not putting anything misleading on those things. And they can also request for you to demonstrate some skills prior to being hired. But that's kind of restricted to a skills assessment, something just strictly to gauge your skill set, and it can't have any type of final product or be considered a form of work for the company. But just to gauge your skill set or your knowledge for a particular area, they can request for you to do some type of skill assessment related to that.
So these are the 3 case studies we will be covering tonight. The first one will be Room A, where we'll discuss the case of Sebastian in disclosing visa status when job searching. So we'll see how one UH student previously has done that. In Room B, we have the case of Zoe, who has to go through the process of explaining sponsorship to an employer that they are already employed with. Room C is Luis, who talks about marketing their skills in the interview process. Note all of these names have been changed, but these are real stories that individuals have gone through. So for those of you who do have the breakout room option, not just yet, but you will have the option to select any room that you want to start in. But don't worry, we do have time set aside so that you can go into each of these case studies and really learn about all the different things we'll be talking about in detail. So I'm going to go over the instructions first on how to do the breakout rooms. While I'm doing that, presenters, if you could please go ahead and join your rooms.